Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of What's Cookin'. Today, we're going to share a story called Hot Pot Night, and then we're going to make a recipe that's called Hot Pot. Are you ready to begin? This book is written by Vincent Chen. Hot Pot Night. What's for dinner? And it looks like they're all asking that question, doesn't it, friends at home? So it looks like they might be in an apartment building, right, where there's many homes in one large building. And so the little boy in this room is calling, "What's for dinner?" And the little girl over here is asking her mom, "What's for dinner?" And same thing with the grandma and the man over here. Let's have hot pot. That's what they suggest. That's their idea. But look, they're shouting it out the window. Why? Are they shouting it to each other? Are they thinking that maybe they should have dinner together? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I think that's a great idea, to share a meal together. And not only to share the meal, but maybe to help cook it together too. I have the pot. You have the broth. She brought the meat. He grew the greens. So it seems like hot pot is maybe a type of soup, would you say, with broth and vegetables and meat? Sounds delicious, doesn't it? Hot pot, let's have hot pot. And I like the rhythm to that phrase, don't you? I like it kind of has a beat. Say it with me. Hot pot, let's have hot pot. And there they are, slicing and dicing and chopping all the ingredients that are going to go inside. Sploosh goes the meat, splash goes the greens. What a good smell. What a long wait. They all must be hungry. They don't like to wait, but it sure does smell good. Hot pot, time for hot pot. Please pass the sauce. Save me some meat. There they are, gathered around the table. I want some more. There's more for all. Do you notice how they're eating their hot pot? What are these utensils called? Do you know? That's right, they're called chopsticks. Hot pot, tasty hot pot. They all look so happy. So it must be good. Plus, I think they're enjoying each other's company. No more cabbage. No more tofu. No more hot pot. What to do? This time, your pot. Next time, my pot. Hot pot, hits the right spot. And that's the end of our story. So they're saying after it was all gone and they did the dishes and it was time to say goodbye, they said, "Thanks for hosting. You did it this time. We'll do it next time." And I just love that idea that they gather together every so often to share a meal together. And I want to show you, boys and girls. Well, here's the recipe on the last pages of this book. The recipe is also uploaded to our website, of course, so you can find it there and print it off if you are going to try making this at home in your own kitchen. But over here, I wanted to read to you a little bit about hot pot, about the history and exactly what it is. It says hot pot is a Chinese soup that literally brings people together and encourages them to share. Diners gather around a hot pot at the dining room table and add ingredients to the boiling broth. Common ingredients include meat, vegetables, tofu, noodles, mushrooms, fish balls, and more. There are many different styles of hot pot across Asia, and each family seems to have its own recipe. That's the other thing I love about this book. Not only does it bring people together and encourages them to share, but it's one of those recipes where you can kind of just make it your own and add whatever you want, right? So in this recipe that we're going to cook together in just a few moments, it gives us some suggested ingredients, but really we could throw in whatever we feel like or whatever we had in the kitchen. Kind of like I do with my meatloaf, actually. All right, my friends, if you are ready, I am ready. Let's gather all our ingredients and we'll get going in the kitchen, shall we? All right, everyone, so we are ready to begin. And as you can see, I have a colander full of fresh vegetables that I picked up at the store today. But again, remember that you can use whatever vegetables you happen to have in your fridge at home. Okay, there are some basic ones that we need for the broth, and that's kind of the first step is to making that broth. Before we can put any of the extra vegetables in or any of our other ingredients, we need to start with a nice hearty broth. So the recipe calls for a tablespoon of oil, and you want to heat that up. I already have mine poured out, and I didn't even have a measuring spoon. Typically what I do is just make sure I coat the bottom of the pan, right? So I'm going to turn my burner on low here. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in an onion because that is the first ingredient, and I already have some chopped here. You can hear that sizzle, so my oil was already nice and hot, like I said. And you just want to saute this, my friends, until it's lightly brown and until it starts to smell fragrant, okay? And you'll know what I mean. Now, there is another half of an onion here that I thought we could chop together. How I like to chop my onion is first by peeling it, of course, cutting off both ends, and then cutting it directly in half. Then I'll put it down flat and cut some slices lengthwise, just like so. And then I can turn it and do the same thing on the other side, or going the other way rather. That usually gives you some nice even pieces. And again, depending on the size of the onion, you don't have to put it all in. I may add just a little bit more since I already have it chopped up here. Now, I wanted to mention to you, my friends, that hot pot is actually a certain type of pot. I don't have a hot pot, so I'm just using a regular pot from my kitchen, and that's a-okay. That's fine. I don't want to use a crock pot because we have to boil the broth first, and a crock pot would take forever to boil. So I wouldn't suggest using a crock pot. If you have an actual hot pot at home, great. But if not, any old pot will do. Do you remember on some of the other cooking shows, if you've tuned in, I told you some tips on how to not cry when chopping an onion. Do you remember what any of those were? I didn't know this either. This is something new that I found out. But if you chill an onion first, if you put it in the refrigerator for just a little while, that actually helps you not to tear up when you're chopping it. And that's because the compounds, whatever irritates your eyes, whatever compounds those are, it usually comes out or seeps out when the air is warmer, right? So if the onion is warm or even room temperature, it's more likely to make you cry. But if it's cold when you're chopping, then it's less likely to make you cry. So that's just one of my cooking tips of the day. All right, let's throw that onion in there. It's starting to get a very light brown and it's starting to smell delicious, but we're going to let it go a little bit longer. And we're going to go ahead and chop our cabbage because that's the next ingredient to go in. Actually, it might be the tomato. Probably doesn't matter. But let's do our tomato. And the recipe calls for a beefsteak tomato. What exactly is a beefsteak tomato, you might ask? Well, it's one of the largest varieties of a tomato, okay? And typically they're very large and round and plump and juicy. And that's why it makes it good for a broth, because of the amount of juice that's inside. You wouldn't want to use a cherry tomato, those real little ones that you sometimes pop in a salad. There's Roma tomatoes. There's hundreds of different kinds. For this recipe, a beefsteak works best. Of course, you want to make sure to wash these vegetables properly. I don't show you that on the show because I don't have a sink down here in the studio, but I promise you that all of my vegetables have been thoroughly washed, as well as my hands. And that's another important cooking tip, right? You always want to make sure your hands are washed and your food is properly washed. And this one is indeed juicy because the juice is getting all over my little cutting mat that I'm using here. Now, do you remember in the story, they were using chopsticks to eat their hot pot? You might be thinking, how does that work if this is a soup? That would be awfully difficult to eat with chopsticks. And I agree with you. But the part is you can certainly spoon the broth out with a spoon. I'm sure they use both. But the idea of the chopsticks is that's what they use to kind of fish out all the vegetables and all the deliciousness that's going in this soup, the pieces of meat. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you kind of take them out one at a time and dip it into any sort of sauce that you prefer, and then eat it very slowly. And that's the other wonderful thing that I love about this recipe is that it's meant to be shared, and I think it's meant to really take your time. You're not rushing through this meal. It's a time to eat slowly, enjoy one another's company, talk about your day, right? Talk about the future, talk about whatever you'd like. But you eat the meal very slowly, which really you should take your time at all meals. I tend to eat very fast. I've always eaten fast, and that's kind of a bad habit. You want to take your time when you're eating. Okay, that onion is cooked just enough, so I'm going to go ahead and add my tomato. It calls for 1 large beefsteak tomato, but if you wanted to add a couple, I don't see any harm in that. Okay, but you're going to get a nice hearty broth just by adding the 1. Kind of clear my area here because of all this tomato juice. The next thing we have to add to the broth is our cabbage. So my cabbage is kind of hidden here in my colander of goodies. Let me take it out. How many of you have ever tasted cabbage before? It looks like a head of lettuce, doesn't it? I've had cabbage in coleslaw. Have you ever tried coleslaw? I love coleslaw. I've had cabbage and onions just sauteed in a pan. That's a delicious meal. Cabbage and onions and noodles, polishki. Okay, but if you haven't had cabbage before, now is a good time to try, right? One of the things that I always mention on What's Cooking is that it's important to try new things. One of the suggested ingredients for hot pot was mushrooms. I don't care for mushrooms, but I at least tried them. Like, that's how I know I don't like them. I tried them once. And so when you think you might not like something, but you're not sure, I just encourage you to try. Okay? Because you don't know until you try. All right, so it says to take about 10 leaves of cabbage and to cut them into bite-sized pieces. So I'm just going to roll my cabbage up, kind of just fold it in half and just slice it right down like this. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing or not. Kind of move that out of the way. Throw that in there. Take another leaf, kind of just fold it in half or 3 or 4 times. I kind of just roll it up. Actually, that was kind of just like rolled like a tortilla, huh? And then slice it down. You can see mine are still kind of wet from when I washed. Roll it up, slice it down. If you have kitchen scissors, you can certainly just snip these cabbage leaves right into the pot. I did not bring my kitchen scissors with me today, so I have to use a nice knife and slice it this way. I'm going to go ahead and give that a stir. It's starting to smell delicious, that's for sure. Now, because they talk about hot pot being a great meal to share, I want you to think about who you could share this meal with. We are still social distancing and like sometimes quarantining because of COVID-19, right? But when things are back to normal, which is hopefully very soon, who could you maybe invite over for a hot pot night? Do you have any ideas? Maybe grandma and grandpa? Or some cousins? Or neighbors? Or friends? I'm actually looking forward to hosting a hot pot night as soon as I'm able to. You can slice these as thin or as thick as you'd like. Okay. And again, I'm going to go ahead and just give that a stir. You want to let this simmer for a while before adding your water. The recipe calls for 8 cups of water. I already have mine measured out in this pitcher. You can go ahead and measure yours out at home. At least get that 1 cup measuring cup ready. I'm going to go ahead and chop 1 more leaf of cabbage. And then I'll just talk to you about the other stuff that I brought today. I have broccoli that I washed because I love broccoli, and I thought that would be a good addition. I have some green onions or some scallions that I thought we could add. You see over here, I have a red pepper. Any colored pepper would be good. And even though I don't like them, I brought some mushrooms because my friends who are going to taste it today might like mushrooms. I have a zucchini. What else do I have? Oh, and I brought some spinach. So again, I just chose things that, you know, I either liked, I already had at home, or that I saw at the store this morning. But you can choose whatever you like. How many of you at home like seafood? Yeah? So you might want to put some shrimp in here or some little fish balls. How many of you like pork? You could thinly slice up some pork and put that in here. All right, I'm going to add my 8 cups of water, and I'm actually going to turn my burner up a little bit higher so that that comes to a boil. And I know you can't see, oh, let's make sure this is open. I know you can't see in my pot. I almost wish my pot was see-through so you could see it as we go. But, oops, this is stuck. I will try to tilt the pot in just a little bit so you can actually see the ingredients boiling inside. The important thing to remember is just to keep an eye on it, right? And to stir it every once in a while. Don't just let this go and forget about it on your stove. You want to stir it fairly often so that all those ingredients and all those flavors really mesh together. Let me go ahead and see if I could tilt the pot and get a shot for you. What do you think? Does it look yummy so far? Okay, remember, this is just our broth. Let's start getting the other ingredients ready. My broccoli is already washed. I probably will want to snip off the stems. Stems are good for you too and can go in there, but I like to snip most of it off and leave just the trees, as I call them. My spinach is already cut and washed, so I don't need to do anything with that. If you have a bigger chunk of broccoli, you might want to cut that in 2 or 3 pieces. And very soon, this is kind of exciting news, at least it's exciting for me. Very soon, the library will be getting a portable kitchen. So in a few episodes, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be upstairs in the library cooking in our portable kitchen. I have to make do down here in the studio, and it's great. And shout out to Dave Cable and his crew and BPTV for setting this all up. But it's going to be much more convenient and much more fun when I can be in the portable kitchen. All right, so my broccoli's kind of chopped up here and set aside. Let's do my scallions. I want to show you what those are, green onions. And when I use green onions, I tend to use all of it. okay? But really what they tell you to use is the white and the pale green parts. So I probably could chop off even more of this leafy dark green part. Again, it doesn't do any harm. You could throw it in there if you wanted to, but I'm going to do just the pale green and the white part of the onion. So let's go ahead and chop that up. Green onions don't make you cry for some reason, but the white ones and the yellow ones and the red ones do. I wonder why. That might be something I have to look up later today. Okay. And then what else did I bring? My pepper, which I'll do here in just a minute, and the zucchini. Now, if you choose to add a zucchini, you probably want to do the same thing. Chop off the ends and then peel it. So I have a vegetable peeler. I think we've peeled things on the show before, but you want to peel away from your body, right, in long strips, just like this. I like to bring the garbage can over to me. Just makes it easier, and I peel right over top of the garbage can until all that peel is gone. Again, going away from my body. Once I have it peeled, I will probably slice it and then quarter it so that it's in chunks or bite-sized pieces for our hot pot. Okay, so my zucchini is all peeled. And I will just, like I said, slice it. And then maybe I would just halve them so that I have pieces about this big. Now, do you remember in the story they said, smells so good, so hard to wait? You do have to wait a little while for this all to cook. Not very long, but long enough for the vegetables to become tender and for the broth to really sit for a while and gather its flavor. I feel like our broth is coming to a boil, or is close to coming to a boil. So I'm going to go ahead and start to throw some of these other ingredients in. My mushrooms are already washed. I'm going to go ahead and throw in a handful of those. The zucchini that I just chopped can go ahead and be thrown in. I'm going to take a handful of that green onion that I chopped up, throw that into the pot. And of course, our broccoli bites. Some of them might need cut again. So, as I sit here and do this, I'm curious. I'm wondering what you have at home that you're chopping up right now. What are you going to add to your hot pot? And as always, I would love for you to share your recipes, the way that you did it. I'd love for you to share pictures of you cooking in the kitchen. So all of those can be emailed to me at volpe@einetwork.net. Oh, I know what else the recipe calls for. As we're doing this, as you're waiting, so for the time to pass, what you could be doing while this is boiling and cooking up is you can be making your sauces. Because remember, they use those chopsticks, and it's fun to use chopsticks, even though it does take practice. So if you have chopsticks at home, I think you should try them. They use chopsticks or a fork or whatever to take out those vegetables and those pieces of meat and those noodles one by one and dip them in some delicious sauces. Then I'm assuming after they do that, they could certainly drink the broth and spoon up the broth. Okay, but they're going in for those vegetables and pieces of meat one by one. And they're dipping them. So if I were setting a table and I were having my friends over, I would not only have a bowl for the hot pot, but a separate, smaller bowl for dipping sauces. And they sell bowls just for that. I just didn't bring any with me today. And you can certainly buy dipping sauces that are already prepared. Or you could have fun and be creative and make your own dipping sauce. Hey, I forgot my pepper. Let's slice this pepper down and then talk about our sauces. When I do my Sunday dinner, my Italian Sunday sauce and meatballs, I like to do, Italian bread with dipping oil. And so I always make up a different, concoction every Sunday. I mean, it's basically olive oil with oregano and parsley, salt and pepper that always goes in. But sometimes I throw in other stuff. If I have basil, I throw basil in there. If I have, probably fresh garlic, I would put that in there. So you can make up your own dipping oils. So for a dipping oil for hot pot, I might start with a sesame oil or a soy sauce, and then add ingredients from there. This was already prepared. It's just a teriyaki sauce. That probably would be really good. You can see it's already opened. I had this in my fridge at home. There's like General Tso's sauce that you can already buy at the grocery store. Chili sauce you can buy at the grocery store. And I think that would make a good dipping sauce for this recipe. But if we wanted to make our own, right? If we just wanted to experiment, let's start with some sesame oil. Pour that in there. And then definitely add some garlic. You know me. Well, if you know me, you know that I love garlic. And I think garlic tastes good in everything. Just about any recipe can taste even better with some garlic. So I'll put some garlic in there and kind of stir that around. And then I might add some ginger. If I had fresh ginger, I would use that. Today I just picked up some ginger paste at our local store. Ginger, garlic, what else? I like my things spicy, so I might add some crushed red pepper. We could add some chili powder. That would make it spicy, right? And then maybe a little bit of salt and pepper. If you're doing soy sauce, don't even add the salt, because soy sauce is salty on its own. It's plenty salty enough. If you're using an olive oil or a sesame oil, you might want to add a dash of salt and a dash of pepper. But voila! The crew here at BPTV will get to sample this and taste it. They can let me know what they think. But there's just, me being creative and coming up with my own concoction. I encourage you to do the same thing. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that another stir. And the only other thing that I didn't add that I wanted to were noodles. So you could add noodles too. I picked these up at the store today. This is still boiling. I still have it on high, right? So these noodles will cook right in here. Just going to go ahead and throw in a handful of those. And again, waiting's the hardest part, isn't it? I'm just going to stir that all in there, let it sit, and wait. In the meantime, I will clean my area and then get my bowls ready so that I can share it with my BPTV friends. And I hope you have fun sharing it with your family at home. And I hope you look forward to sharing it again in the near future when we can get together again with, I don't know, friends, neighbors, relatives. You can have a hot pot night, a hot pot party, right? I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed the recipe. And I thank you for watching. And I'll see you again real soon on What's Cooking. Take care, everybody.